Yo, PiePurplji here, and welcome back to another one of these tier ranking videos. Now, as you can see obviously by the title and the thumbnail of this video, we are going to be doing a little bit of a smaller, more ranking system. But today, as requested by a user called, I'll put the comment on screen because the username is really hard to pronounce, so I'll just put the comment on screen as you can obviously see right now. But yeah, as requested, I was requested to do a Pokemon Generations tier list. So that's what I'm going to be doing right now. So anyways, let's go ahead and get things started. So let's go ahead and start off with the first generation of Pokemon, and we'll just drag it right here. Now, contrary to popular belief, I think Pokemon Generation 1 deserves an A tier. So it is not an S tier by any means. Obviously, there are certain things with Gen 1 that aren't entirely good about it, so to speak. Like, obviously, aside from, hardware limitations, like, the Game Boy being a really, what's it called, like a limiting console, so to speak. Like, it's super limited because of the fact that, it's like, not the fact that it's old, it's just, as I said before, it's really limited. There's not much stuff as you can do with it, like, the 3DS or anything like that. But, what, for the console, and, especially for the time, it was a really solid generation. But there are, a couple things that, aren't really too great about it. Like some of the Pokemon can be pretty, unoriginal, like, Grimer and Muck, like they're just sludge. There are a ton of things about Gen 1 that don't make it, a perfect generation. But obviously, this list is a little bit, biased, a little bit opinionated. So if you have any of your own ideas for how this tier list should be done, then, definitely make one for yourself down in the comments below. I'll leave a link to the tier list maker in the description down below. So let's go ahead and go into the second generation of Pokemon. So I think the second generation of Pokemon, I think it's really tempting. For now, we'll put it in a very high A tier. I wouldn't say the second generation is perfect by any means, but it definitely is better than the first generation of Pokemon. There are so many things that this generation did right, but in terms of like the whole generation, it's not just like this is like a generation thing. So when you talk about generations, you have to include all games. So that doesn't mean just Gold, Silver. You also have to include other games, such as Crystal in that mix. However, if we take the third generation, which included the Hoenn region games. Oops, I did not mean to do that. But if it also includes the Hoenn region games as well as the Kanto remakes of Fire and Leaf Green. I'd say I'd say Ruby. I think Ruby goes right there. I think Ruby is like a very, or not Ruby, but the third generation of Pokemon is a really, really good generation. It's really solid. There's a ton of things that it does right. Like it remade the original Generation 1 games and made them, quite a bit better in my opinion. And obviously made the entire, new generation of the Hoenn region. And there are so many like crazy cool concepts with the Hoenn region, like the Weather Trio. The starters are pretty good for Generation 3, so those are honestly my opinions. I do prefer, Generation 3 over Generation 2, and so on and so forth. But obviously, these are obviously, my own opinions. So now let's move on to the fourth generation of Pokemon. Now, a lot of other people can agree with me on this one and saying that the fourth generation has so much good about it. Like, obviously, like Hard Gold and Soul Silver on its own, just like right there, just kind of puts it in an S tier as is. But this is the whole generation we're talking about, so you have to include Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. And those games were like really, really phenomenal, especially Platinum, because it took the original formula of Diamond and Pearl, but not only made it better, but also improved on it, like making the distortion world and stuff like that. It was honestly like a really, 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 really amazing generation for Pokemon in general. However, this is obviously a very, very controversial opinion. But if you have seen my tier list of ranking all the Pokemon games, then you would know that I have a very, very big personal bias to the fifth generation of Pokemon. Just there's so much good about the fifth generation of Pokemon. Like, excluding all biases aside, there's so much good. Like, you can't argue how much good the fifth generation did. Obviously there was some uncreative Pokemon, kind of looking at, Vanillish. That's what a lot of people tend to look at. But there are obviously, super, super, like, really well-inspired Pokemon. Like, Haxorus. A lot of people like Haxorus. A lot of people like Pokemon like Bisharp, Crocodile. Like, there's so many Pokemon within the generation that make up, it's so good. there are things like, they added fusions, which is something that people wanted, and, they actually got them as the, the cover legendary in Pokemon Black and White too. It had an amazing soundtrack. It had, things such as, like the Black Tower and the White Forest, something kind of like the Battle Frontier, but in my honest opinion, a little different, and I honestly, a little bit better in my opinion. And you can't argue about, like, that's just the base game itself. That's not even including, like, the massive story, and that's for, like, both games as well. Like Black and White, it had this entire, like, story focused around N and Team Plasma and how they're trying to, like, quote unquote liberate Pokemon. And then in Black and White 2, it's like Team Plasma is going on world domination, and then there's a bunch of other stuff going on, and they're trying to steal Kyurem, and there's fusion stuff. Like, there's so much good about the 5th generation that, you just can't really disagree with. So that brings us to the last 2 generations, Pokemon 6th generation and Pokemon 7th generation. So I think the 6th generation goes right about there. I do think that the original Generation 3 games, like, Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, are a bit step up over Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but including X and Y, like, those are really solid games, but there are, like, a couple things that just make them, like, kind of forgettable, so to speak. Like, they're not forgettable games, not by any means, but they're just, like, some things about the games that just kind of make them a little bit forgettable. Like, when you think of Gen 6, obviously, you think of Mega Evolution, you probably think of ORAS, Primal Reversions, but, like, when you think of the 6th generation, is the first thing that comes to mind is, like, first thing that comes to mind is a Panchimp, like, most people won't remember things like that, obviously, like, the anime was really good in the 6th generation, but aside from that, the 6th generation doesn't have too much going for it, but I definitely do prefer it over the original, previous 2, generation 1 and 2 generations. So now it's time for the very highly debatable 7th generation. So I think the 7th generation goes right there. I think the 7th generation is honestly, a really, really solid generation. Like, the fact that they changed the formula, making it instead of, gyms, you have to do the trials and the totem Pokemon and the, the Z crystals, which, basically replace Mega Evolutions. But aside from that, it was honestly a really amazing generation. There was so much stuff going for it. Like, Sun and Moon was obviously, pretty good as it is. But when you, like, take into consideration Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, it just took what Sun and Moon was going and just made it, like, 10 times better. Like, it took the original story, obviously tweaked it a little bit, and just made it, so much better. So, in my honest opinion, I do think that the 7th generation is not a bad one, obviously, but it's very debatable, so, these are honestly, my opinions. So there we go, that is the entire completed tier list. So, not really any tiers in, B, C, and D, because I feel like, there's not really a bad generation, it's just that some I prefer, better than others. So, obviously, as I said before, if you want to make your own tier list, then I'll leave a link to this in the description down below. But anyways, I'm going to end things off here. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, then feel free to leave this video a like, maybe even a comment, and if you really wanted to, you can even subscribe to be notified of when future videos come out. And that is all I have for now. So I'll see you in the next video. Peace. Bye.